Okay, so we're going to work through the solutions to the Intermediate Tier Maths Paper 2 from the summer of 2019. The first 40 marks takes us up to the end of question 8. So 40 marks there gets us into the grade C, and then 40 marks beyond that, everything you get takes you into grade B or consolidates any little slip-ups you make in the first 8 questions. So what I've started to encourage students to do at the start is, when they get an opportunity, because they rarely run out of time, is on this first formula page to actually stick on there to regurgitate from their memory all the key little things that students are required to remember. So trig relationships is one, so if we put in this one here, the little triangles, so, car, tower. This is a calculator expected paper, so we're almost certainly going to need to use those. And then if you've learnt Pythag as a squared equals b squared plus c squared, then it's really important that you have the a in the right place, which is on the hypotenuse. So there's some triangle information. Then if we think about areas and volumes, circle, radius r, circumference is 2 times pi times r, area is pi r squared. If we turn that circle into a cylinder with a height h, then the volume is going to be pi r squared, where r is the radius, times the height. So that's some circle information. If you think about triangle, the area of the triangle is half base times height. So those are some important little area and volume sets of information. Then we've got our metric and imperial equivalences, which we're expected to know. So we'll put these down here. The ones that we're required to learn are 8 kilometers, are approximately, so the squiggly equal sign means approximate. So 8 kilometers is approximately equivalent to 5 miles. 1 kilogram is approximately equivalent to 2.2 pounds, which is lb. 1 litre is approximately equivalent to 1.75 pints. So those are the 3 metric to imperial equivalences, and then the other one, which links litres, is fluid capacity, which is a litre, to volume, which is 1 litre is equivalent to 1,000 cubic centimetres. Then if we think about speed, distance, time, that's the triangle to remember for speed, distance, time. Then we've got density, mass and volume is another one we need to know the relationship for, and also population density is population divided by area. So we need to know the relationship between speed, distance, time, density, mass and volume. Population density is population over area. And then fractions of an hour, we've got a quarter of an hour equals 15 minutes equals 0.25. Half an hour, 30 minutes, which is 0.5 of an hour. 3 quarters, 45 minutes, 0.75. Really common mistake students use is to decimalize that time. They would write that as 0.15 of an hour, 0.3, 0.45, and that's wrong. It's those. 20 minutes will be a third of an hour, which is 0.33333, not 0.3. So those are useful to remember as well. So the more times you write those out, the better the chances are that you will remember them, because you need to remember all of that information. Once it's written down, then it means you can forget about it and you can come looking for it when you need to, if you come across any questions where you need to use those. Okay, so let's make a start. Question 1. Calculate each of the following. So this is a calculator expected paper, so don't faff about trying to work these things out without a calculator. Complete waste of your time. Type it in exactly as you see it. So 4.8 squared plus square root 28.09. Press equals. Write that down. Check to see that there's no command to round it. There is no command to round it, so you leave it like that. 4/9 of 78.3. Your calculator's got a fraction button, which we're going to use. It doesn't have an of button, so the one thing you have to remember here is that when you're working in maths, the word of is a command to multiply. So on your calculator, fraction button, 4 on top, 9 on the bottom, times 78.3 equals 34.8. Check there's no command to round. There isn't. Leave it like that. 1000 times the reciprocal of 8. Okay, so here's a trigger word that you need to be familiar with. Often people aren't. Reciprocal means 1 over. Okay, so what that means is 1000 times 1 over whatever the number is. So 1000 times 1 over 8. 1000 times, not 4, 1 over 8. 125. And then part B is a rounding question. Write 437.6 correct to 2 significant figures. So with significant figures, you start counting as soon as you hit, when you're moving from left to right in a number, the most significant number in this, most significant figure or digit is the 4, because it represents 400. So even though 7 is a bigger digit, its only value is 7 because it's in the unit column. So the 2 most significant figures that we've got are the 4 and the 3, which means to 2 significant figures, this is either going to be 430 or 440. It's not 43 or 44 because that massively changes the number. The number is between 430 and 440. So 430 or 440. And then you make the decision as to which one of these that number is actually closest to. Because the next number is bigger than 5, it's closer to 440. It's really, really important as well that you don't then put 0.0 on the end. The whole point of rounding it is you're making the number simpler than what you started with. So it's just 440. So the marks for that, straightforward for this one, it's 2 marks. 1 mark if you had split it up and you got one part right and one part wrong. This one is 1 mark. This one, there's 1 mark for the site of 1 over 8, which is dealing with the reciprocal, 1 mark for the answer. 2 in total, and 1 mark for 440. So that should have been a nice straightforward warm-up just using your calculator. Question 2. Find the value of 5f plus 7g when f is 3.8 and g is negative 2.6. So we're replacing the letters with these values. When you do that, you replace the letter with a pair of brackets. You break a hole where the letter is, and then you can put in the value. So that is the maths that we're doing, and on our calculator, just type it in exactly as you've written it. That way you're not going to make any mistakes. So 5 bracket 3.8 plus 7 bracket, now that's a negative, not a subtract, so it's this minus here, 2.6 close bracket equals 0.8. Check to make sure there's no rounding instruction. There isn't, so you can just leave it like that. Part B, solve the following equation. Give your answer correct to 1 decimal place. So I've got a rounding instruction here that I need to remember about. So I'll just highlight or underline that now to remind myself. So I'm dealing with an equation. What you have to remember is you're trying to get x on its own on the left hand side and everything else on the right hand side. The rules of equations are to maintain the balance. Whatever you do to one side, you have to do the same to the other. So the first thing we need to get rid of here is the take 4 by doing the mathematical opposite of it, which is adding 4. If I'm adding 4 to that side, I have to add 4 to the other side as well. So on the left hand side, I get 7x plus 0 is 7x. Minus 4 plus 4 is 0, it's gone. Equals 12 add 4, 16. So 7x is 16. The 7 and the x are joined by times. We don't write it in because it looks like another x. So to get that x on its own, I have to do the opposite of timesing by 7, which is dividing by 7. If I divide the left hand side by 7, I have to divide the right hand side by 7 as well to maintain the balance. So this side now just becomes 1x, and this side becomes 16 divided by 7, which in algebra we write as 16 over 7. The instruction is to give that to 1 decimal place. So on our calculator, if we do 16 over 7 and then press the SD button, we get that 2.285. So to then write it to 1 decimal place, so if you write down the whole thing first of all, or a bigger part of it, and then round it, so 1 decimal place, with decimal place rounding, you start counting with the first digit after the decimal point. So it's going to be 2.2 or 2.3, and because the next digit is greater than 5, it's closest to 2.3. So to 1 dp. Marks for that. You get 2 marks for 0.8. If you decided to work them out separately, if you'd evaluated that correctly or that correctly, you would have got 1 out of 2. When working with the equation, there is 1 mark for getting it down to 7x equals 16. There is a 1 mark for getting it as x is 16 over 7. And then there's 1 mark for correctly rounding to 1 decimal place. Question 3. Circle the longest time period from the list given below. So in order to do that, it's easiest to get it all in the same format. So most of these are in hours. So let's turn 180 minutes into hours by dividing by 60. That's 3 hours. 4.5, well, we got that on the front. 0.5 of an hour is 4 hours 30 minutes. So that's 4 hours 30. This one is already in hours and minutes. 4 1/4, quarter of an hour is 15 minutes. And 1/6 of a day is 1/6 times 24, which is 4, but if you want to check it in your calculator, because there's 24 hours in a day, so that's 4 hours. Okay, so your choices here The longest time period, 3 hours, 3 hours 30, 4:45, 4:15, 4. It's 4:45. Part B. Circle the longest distance from the list given below. Same thing, we want to get all of these in the same format, and probably it's easiest to get them all into meters. So 30,000 millimeters, there's 10 millimeters in a centimeter, so divide by 10, that's going to give us 3,000 centimeters. There's 100 centimeters in a meter, so divide by 100, that's 30 meters. That's 250 meters. There's 2,000 meters in a kilometer, so that's going to be 2,070 meters. There's 100 centimeters in a meter, so divide by 100, that's going to be 40 meters. And 2.4 is going to be 2,400 meters. So the biggest distance there is that one. 3 part C. Circle either true or false for each statement given below. 7 kilometers is less than 5 miles. So these are all the equivalences that we're expected to know. We've written out first of all. So 8 kilometers is roughly 5 miles. So 7 kilometers is going to be less than 5 miles. So that's true. 1 kilogram is less than 2 pounds. So 1 kilogram is about 2 pounds, 2.2 pounds. So it's more than that. So that's false. 1 litre is less than a pint. No, 1 litre is nearly 1 3/4 pints. 8 litres is less than 900 cubic centimetres. Well, 1 litre is 1,000, so 8 litres is going to be 8,000. So that's also false. So if you know those, if you learn those, that's a really easy question. So marks for question 3. 1 mark for getting that one right. 1 mark for getting that one right. 1 mark if you get only one of those wrong. 2 marks if you get them all correct. An important thing, point to make here, when you are given a list of choices, for goodness sake, don't guess unless you absolutely have to. Do some work to get these into the same format before you make your decision. Question 4. Catherine makes the following statement. If you double the length of each side of a rectangle, you will double its perimeter and also double its area. Is Catherine correct? Show clearly using an example how you came to your decision. So you have to use an example. So if we take a rectangle, and it doesn't matter what we choose, let's go for 2 by 5. If we have a 2 by 5, its perimeter will be 5, 10, 12, 14, and its area would be 2 times 5, 10. So you need to know, to work out an area of a rectangle, you multiply the length by the width. To work out the perimeter, you add the distance all the way around. So it would be 5 times 2 plus 5 times 2, or 5 plus 2, doubled. Now if we double the sides, then we go from a 5 centimeter to a 10, and from a 2 centimeter to a 4. The perimeter this time will be 1428, and the area will be 40. So she's saying if you double the length of each side, you will double the perimeter and the area. Well, the perimeter has doubled, going from 14 to 28, but the area hasn't. In this case, it's quadrupled. So all we need to say is Catherine isn't correct. The perimeter does double, but the area doesn't. And that's what you need for your 5 marks. So how the 5 marks are awarded: there's 1 mark, which is your method mark, and that's for showing 2 rectangles where the sides have doubled. They don't have to visually double, but that the measurements you were using have doubled. Then you get 1 mark for a correct perimeter and area for the first one, and 1 mark for a correct perimeter and area for the second, and then your conclusion that she's wrong and that the perimeter does and the area doesn't. So that's your 5 marks for question 4. Question 5. Okay, so this is the OCW question. So there's 2 marks here for how you organize your work. So let's read the whole question carefully. 18% of £256 is shared in the ratio of 2 to 1. Calculate the value of the larger share. Give your answer correct to the nearest 10 pence. So there's 2 instructions. First instruction, calculate the value of the larger share in the ratio, and then the second instruction is to round it to the nearest 10 pence. First thing we have to do then is find what 18% of 256 is. And remember, we're allowed to use a calculator, so don't waste time or risk making mistakes by doing 10%, 5%, etc., etc. So 18% of £256 is 18% times 256. So on our calculator, we're going to use the percentage button, which is above the open bracket. So we do 18 shift open bracket to get that, times 256 is, and we're talking about money, so we'll put the money symbol in, 46.08. This is the quantity we're going to split in the ratio 2 to 1. So when we're dividing into ratios, we add up the ratios to get the number of equal parts. Each part will be of size £15.36. So we've got the 2 part and the 1 part. The 1 part is 15.36. The 2 part is going to be twice as big, £30.72. So the smaller part, £15.36, large part, £30.72. So calculate the value of the larger share. We have. Give your answer to the nearest 10 pence. So we now have to round that to the nearest 10 pence. It's either going to be £30.70 or £30.80. It's closer to £30.70. That's it. So the mark scheme for that, there's a method mark for how you work out your 18%, and an answer mark for £46.08. If you've just written down £46.08, you get both marks. Then to work out the larger share, we're finding the smaller share by dividing by 3 and doubling it to get £30.72. And then whatever your answer is, if you've gone wrong, if you then round it correctly to the nearest 10 pence, you get your rounding mark for that. And then for the OCW, you get 1 mark for being organised in how you lay it out. So anybody could read that and figure out what I'm doing. And then the second mark is for being consistent with your units. In this case, percent when I'm talking about percent, pounds when I'm talking about pounds. I'm not having pounds and pence in the same place. So those are those 2 marks. Question 6, algebra. So the instruction here is to factorize. When you're factorizing, you're putting things into brackets. So factorize triggers, okay, I'm looking for commonality between each term. The only thing that's common to those is A. If I take the A out, I'm left with 7B in the first part and just 11 in the second part. And then I can check that by multiplying out the bracket. A times 7B is 7AB, A times 11 is 11A. Another instruction to factorize, so I'm putting in brackets. Now this time I can take x out as common because x squared is x times x. So what have I got to multiply x by to get x squared? X. And if I've taken the x out of that, I'm just left with 8. Check it by multiplying. X times x is x squared. X times 8 is 8x. The command on the last bit is to expand. That means you want to get rid of the bracket. And you do this by multiplying whatever's outside the bracket by each term inside. So I've got to do 4y times 2, which is 8y. And then I've got to do 4y times 3y, which was 4 times 3 is 12. Y times y is y squared, and the sign is negative. Straightforward mark for that. 1 for A, 1 for B, 1 for site of 8y, and 1 for site of the minus 12y squared. Okay, question 7. The diagram shows 2 congruent triangles. The coordinates of each vertex are shown. So the vertex is the corner, the point on each side of the triangle. Now the key word here is congruent. Congruent means they're identical. So they are exactly the same shape, same angles, same sizes. What you have to do here in order to work out what's missing, so I'm missing, there's an A there I need to know, and there's a B there that I need to know. To work out that x coordinate there, it's going to be the same distance from that x coordinate as there is between these two on the corresponding triangle. So to go from 8 to 3, I'm dropping by 5, because 8 take away 5 is 3. So to get that A there, it's going to be minus 1 take away 5, which is negative 6. And then we have to do the same with the y coordinate. So to go from 15 to 5, I'm dropping 10. So to go to 5 to there, I've got to take off 10. Which takes me to negative 5. So quite tricky, that one. Intermediate tier students don't like working with coordinates or congruency. So there's 1 mark for the negative 6, and there's 1 mark for the negative 5. Part B. Draw an enlargement of the rectangle below. So it's going to be bigger, and the key here is how much bigger. 3 times bigger, that's telling you, but also often they will tell you where to base your enlargement from. And this is telling you to base your enlargement from the coordinate 1, 2. So we're taking our enlargement from that point. And then what we do is we work out how far we need to travel to get from that centre of enlargement to the shape. And we only move in vertical and horizontal movements. So we're going across 1 and up 1. The enlargement, because it's a scale factor 3, will be 3 times that journey. So rather than going across 1 and up 1, we've got to go across 3 and up 3. So my enlargement is going to start at that point, and then it's going to be 3 times bigger than that one. So you would use a pencil to do this in the exam. I'll use a pen because it's easier for you to see. I'm just trying to find a ruler in my study. There we go. So you would make sure you draw this carefully. So the rectangle is going to be 3 times as wide and 3 times as tall. So 3 times 2 is 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's how the centre of enlargement works. You work out the journey you have to take from whatever point that instructing you to place as the centre to the starting point of your enlargement. So across 1, up 1. So if this was a scale factor of 4, we'd be going across 4 and up 4 and starting the shape from there. Once we know the starting point, we then enlarge the shape. There's 3 marks for that. There's 3 marks if you've correctly enlarged the shape and from the correct point. If you've just drawn a 6 by 3 rectangle, you would get 2 out of those 3 marks. But it's quite an easy thing to learn that. Okay, question 8. This takes us to the end of the first 40 marks. Alison and Safraz play a game. They each have a different bag of cards. Alison has the following cards in her bag, spelling Carnarvon, and Safraz has the following cards in his bag, spelling Aber. They each take a card at random from their bag. They make a note of the letter and return the card to the bag. They do this 100 times. Who do you think is likely to choose the letter R more often? You must explain your decision and show all your working. So this is a probability question. So if we deal with Alison first of all, the probability of Alison pulling an R from her bag is going to be 2 out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So she's got a 2 in 10 or 1 in 5 chance of pulling out an R. Now when she does this 100 times, we can use this to estimate how many times an R is likely to come out. So it'll be 2 out of 10 times 100, which lots of you will be able to do in your head, but remember this, you're allowed to use a calculator, so if you're a bit wobbly, use your calculator. So 2 out of 10 times 100 is 20 times. So she's expected to pull the letter R out 20 times. Now for Safraz, the probability of pulling an R out is 1 out of 4. There's 1 R in 4 cards. So for Safraz, when he does it 100 times, quarter of 100 is 25. He's likely to get an R 25 times. So who do I think is most likely to choose the letter R? Safraz. More likely, as it will come out 25 times possibly compared to 20 for Alison. With probability, you're only estimating chance. It doesn't mean it's definitely going to come out 25 times, but that it's more likely to. So with that one, we're looking at a B1 for the probability and a B1 for Safra's probability, and then a method mark for working out how many times out of 100 and the correct solution, the correct decision that it's Safra's because it's going to happen more frequently. So there you go, that's the first 40 marks on the paper, which is a pretty fair paper so far.